Our third speaker today is Dr. Peter Landless. He's a medical doctor who's currently serving as the director of the Health Ministries Department of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. He's an adjunct professor of medicine at the University of Maryland School of Medicine and adjunct associate professor at the Loma Linda Schools of Medicine and Public Health. So today he's going to help us try to balance the principles of the Adventist health message with the need for immunization. Dr. Landless, the time is yours.
Thank you very much. What a privilege it is to be with you today. Thank you for the invitation, and also thanks to my colleagues for outstanding presentations. It's a privilege to share with you some thoughts on the on living wisely through and beyond the pandemic, particularly as this relates to the church. And there has been much discussion, and today's focus, excuse me, is particularly related to how does the Seventh-day Adventist Church, with its particular DNA in health, right from the beginning, health has been germane to who Seventh-day Adventists are, even before we got a name prior to 1863. Co-founders of our church had understandings, had visions of health practices. Joseph Bates left aside significantly damaging health practices, including caffeine, alcohol, tobacco. And we know that Ellen White in 1848 spoke about the dangers of tobacco. And then only in 1863 did we see the major health vision. So right from when we started our very beginnings, and when we go back to creation, God placed us in a situation, a beautiful setting, where health, holistic health, could be preserved, could be maintained, and could be practiced. And that's because God is a gracious God who's given us the gift of life, a precious gift from a loving and grace-filled God. And we've been created in his image. And he not only created us, he didn't just leave it alone. He sustains all things, and he continues sustaining us. The fact that we got up this morning, the fact that we have life, that we have opportunity, that we have ability, is because of God's sustaining power. And despite the many illnesses and issues which we face in this broken world, God is still the healer of our diseases. And we know that even in our brokenness, we also know that we will not be healed from every disease, but generally we understand that God is our healer, gives us wholeness in our brokenness, and we can gratefully remember that he is faithful, and without him nothing was made that has been made. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. And so we have, in order to guide and guard our health, we have lifestyle principles which are foundational to the Seventh-day Adventist Church health message, and germane, as I said, to who we are. And despite our brokenness, with optimal health lifestyle practices, we can foster positive health outcomes. And the fact that somebody may have a chronic disease which is incurable does not mean that they cannot have a wholeness in Jesus Christ, with spiritual wholeness, mental wholeness, despite our physical brokenness. And these optimal health practices help maintain the function of the whole being, and at the same time, the immune system keeping it at its best. There are some very important foundational principles of Adventist health ministry, and these are key to remember as we tackle any health issue, and particularly the one under discussion today. The Bible is foundational to all we as Seventh-day Adventists believe in and practice in our health ministry. Our health ministries are consonant with the Spirit of Prophecy counsels. It's wonderful and affirming and encouraging when we see how science over the years has confirmed in so many situations what was explained and shared with the church through Ellen White 120 years ago. What a blessing we have that we've had this information. What challenges me and troubles me is that we as a church have selective hearing, because we listen to what suits us at times and we don't listen to what doesn't suit us. Confirmed by peer-reviewed, evidence-based health science. So what is biblical foundation, consonant with the spirit of prophecy, and, as I've mentioned, confirmed by peer-reviewed, evidence-based health science. And this is a crucial component, because whenever we test something, which should it be regarded as safe or useful, then we need to see whether it withstands rigorous scrutiny. Is there robust evidence for its use? Ellen White gives some important principles, many important principles, but how do we interpret science and balance it against the Word of God? Some people say, well, science is not trustworthy. We should move away from it and just trust the Word of God. Of course, we trust the Word of God fully. And that is, as I mentioned, foundational. But she counsels and says to us, rightly understood, science and the written word agree, and each sheds light on the other. Together they lead us to God by teaching us something of the wise and beneficent laws through which he works. And this has been my experience in a career in medicine and latterly in health ministry and administration, that God's teaching shows us his wise and beneficent laws. It's amazing to see what God has created, how it all comes together, and how it works. And of course, and I emphasize this very, very significantly, lifestyle interventions are foundational to staying well. It saddens me that I receive even today letters which say the church does not talk about lifestyle and healthful living as important in this pandemic. That is totally untrue. In every presentation, every documentation that we have produced and worked with, lifestyle, the health message are key and foundational. What is clearly understood is that right now, being discussed and taking the forefront of conversation are the questions surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. But as a premise and as a foundation and as an ongoing, not only thread, but chain of instruction and encouragement, lifestyle interventions remain a key and foundational approach of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in maintaining holistic health. And so there are many programs, you're aware of many of them: celebrations, New Start Plus, Creation Health, 8 Weeks to Wellness, Win Wellness, and many more. Programs which are evidence-based, programs which have been constructed on the 8 natural remedies and sharing with us how best we can be helpful. We have not, nor dare we, move away from these foundations. I'm also interested that people say, well, you know, we want to boost our immune system. I would share with you and encourage you that the best way to have a boosted immune system is to live the Adventist health message all the time. Because an immune system, to function optimally, needs to be cared for. And that is not only by what we eat, how we rest, exercise, drinking lots of fresh, clean water, safe and careful exposure to sunlight, temperance, trust in God. So many of all of those 8 natural remedies which come to bear, and then bearing in mind the importance of optimism and others, which I'm going to share with you, and social support in helping us to be healthy. What are the factors affecting our immunity? Age, the extremes of age, the very, very young, the older. It's at these times that people are the most vulnerable because of the changes that come in the immune system. Pregnancy is a vulnerable state for infections because of some immune compromisation in the pregnant state. Lack of sleep. How many attending this meeting have had adequate sleep last night? How many of us give ourselves the option and the opportunity of adequate sleep? Do we take good care of our nutrition? What about the issues of the obesity situation, which is rampant around the world, and metabolic syndrome, inactivity, not moving, severe stress? And during this pandemic, all of us have been affected by stress, isolation, separation, loss. And then I mentioned lack of immunization affects our immunity. If we are primed against many of the infectious diseases, as has been mentioned in our previous presentation, many of those diseases have either disappeared or have become far, far less common than they used to be. And as again was mentioned, we're seeing resurgence because of the vaccine hesitancy in diseases like measles and rubella. So it's important to keep the immune system primed and aware. Optimal immune health depends largely on our nutrition. More veggies, plenty of fruits, whole grains, plant foods, healthy fats. Choose the unrefined foods. These are the ways that we can do the best as far as our nutrition is concerned. And interestingly, a balanced vegetarian diet supplies the needed nutrients that are needed to keep the immune system healthy, to keep the repair of DNA in the life cycle of the cell going, to stimulate production and activity of the various immune cells, and to support the immune function in general, not forgetting antioxidant functions. And again, I was saddened to receive a letter from a colleague the other day which said, will the church now recommend the Adventist health message and healthy eating as the response to the COVID-19 vaccine? Well, diet is a portion of it. Diet along with the holistic health message, absolutely. A balanced vegetarian diet. And that along with the appropriate interventions of public health. Essential nutrients, zinc, selenium, iron, copper. As you'll see, and I've placed these on the slides so that you will see that these are available from a balanced vegetarian diet. Folic acid, vitamin A, vitamin B6, vitamin C. And look at the delightful and delectable foods they come in, naturally packed in their God-given created status. Vitamin D, safe exposure to sunshine daily, dairy used as in moderation, certain mushrooms, fortified foods and cereals, and supplement as needed to maintain healthy blood levels. And this is important that we know our numbers, that we have this checked, and that we do the appropriate supplementation when it's needed. Supplements should be taken in consultation with the healthcare provider. And one supplements, by definition, what is deficient, not what can be adequately sourced in a healthy and balanced diet. So this needs to be a conversation with one's healthcare provider, but one needs to be aware of the importance of maintaining adequate levels of these clearly helpful nutrients. Of course, vitamin B12, for over-lacto vegetarians especially, dairy is used as a condiment, modestly, is a good source. Total vegetarians or vegans need to take a supplement. Plant food is not a source of vitamin B12. And this is a setting where supplementation is recommended for all vegetarians, as one supplements what is deficient, not what can be adequately sourced in a healthy, balanced diet. B12 absorption becomes less reliable as we get older, and so it's important to bear this B12 supplementation in mind and to ensure we get adequate amounts. We've touched on daily exercise, pure fresh water in the liquids, careful regular exposure to sunshine, which helps with that vitamin D, rest 7 to 8 hours each night, getting out into the fresh air. And interestingly, Ellen White made the comment of walking in the outdoors, even in the cold, being the best exercise possible. And studies coming out now. Just recently, I've seen a study which relates to the importance of exercising outdoors or being outdoors as being a more healthy option than just exercising indoors. Of course, exercising indoors beats not exercising at all. So do it. Balance in our lives, temperance, avoiding all things harmful and using those things which are healthful wisely. We've talked about balanced nutrition. Positive, informed choices, informed from best sources, optimism, a hopeful outlook. And isn't this an issue which has come particularly in the last 2 years, where it becomes, if we do not have hope and faith, more and more difficult to remain optimistic. And what I'm thrilled about is that we as Seventh-day Adventists have a hope. I think of it more than once, many times in many days, that the handkerchief of Genesis is ready to wipe away the handkerchief of Revelation is ready to wipe away the tears of Genesis. We see the plan of God. We see that there is an end in sight. We have a hope. We also know that God is faithful, and he will see us through this pandemic. And if some of us don't survive, we will see his face. We have a blessed hope. Integrity is so important. As I read many of the questions that come across my desk every day, I'm saddened at the lack of integrity by many who promote, promulgate, and preach and teach wrong and fictional so-called science and theories. We need to have integrity and be honest. Of course, during this crucial time, in living a healthful life, supportive relationships and connectedness, staying in touch is important. Trust in God is foundational. Let's remember why we are here, whose we are, to whom we belong, and who is leading us. And I would posit that we look very carefully at this, that trust in God and all the good things we have mentioned, trust in God is the foundational. An important adjuvant to prevention, though, and living healthfully is also immunization. It's not, as some people say, we can just do this by living healthfully, or others who say, I'm just going to get vaccinated and live as I please. It's not either or. It's a both and. Monitor your health, act on your numbers, have regular checkups. Even during the pandemic, make sure that you are followed up. Don't ignore symptoms. Minimize your risk. We've seen an interesting decrease in common colds and flu even, although it seems to me that the flu is beginning to rise again. I don't know whether that's COVID fatigue, but washing hands often is very, very helpful. Avoid contact with those who are known to be infectious. Wear masks appropriately. And if one is symptomatic, fever, cough, runny nose, stay at home. Clean, disinfect, regularly touch surfaces. Undertake responsible, informed immunization. This has been covered so articulately and clearly by Jennifer. I really thank her again for her presentation. And so the church encourages responsible immunization, thought through, studied, evidence-based, and where the benefits outweigh the risks. But again, the church, as was emphasized, is not the conscience of the individual, and the individual needs to make their own choice. Again, emphasizing that the choice not to be immunized is not and should not be seen as the dogma or the doctrine of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. What does the church say about the COVID-19 vaccines? Again, this has been well addressed already, and in the interest of time, I will not repeat everything. But this is a reference to the initial informationals which came out with the COVID-19 vaccine written by the representatives from the General Conference Department of Health Ministry, the General Conference Biblical Research Institute, and Loma Linda University School of Pharmacy and School of Public Health. And all these consultations have not just been within either the General Conference nor just with Loma Linda. It has included prestigious institutions such as the Bloomberg Public Health School of Johns Hopkins, the University of Maryland, the World Health Organization, and the Pan American Health Organization as well. There's a more recent document, and this too has been carefully discussed, looking at the issues related to mandates. But given the ongoing disinformation and concerns regarding public health mandates, the church released its affirmation or reaffirmation of our response to COVID-19 vaccines. And this again has been covered. The problem related to the mark of the beast, Dr. Diop mentioned this right in the introductory presentation, and masterfully covered this component. And we are clear in our thinking that the COVID-19 vaccine is not the mark of the beast. It should be clear that Seventh-day Adventists understand the mark of the beast to be a non-literal mark, but a sign of allegiance that identifies the bearer as loyal to the power represented by the beast. So what does the church say about the COVID-19 vaccines, looking as far as taking a vaccine being unclean? Again, this has also been alluded to already in the presentations today. In this regard, it should be clarified that the abiding biblical instructions forbidding the consumption of unclean food and blood do not apply to vaccines for the obvious reason that vaccines are produced as medication to save lives and not to serve as food. And this was an input by the Biblical Research Institute after careful consultation, and helping us to understand the approach that we as committed, practicing Seventh-day Adventists may follow in our health practices. The current science on the vaccines is going to be very, very masterfully presented by Dr. Cassiano. But there are a number of vaccines approved by the World Health Organization, and vaccines with an efficacy above 50% have been helpful in bringing deaths from COVID down significantly. With rare exceptions, immunized individuals don't land in ICU and do not die from the disease. The vaccine does not mean that we will not get the disease, but it will mean that the severe side effects, including death and hospitalization, are very, very significantly reduced. And yes, immunized individuals have a low risk of transmitting COVID-19 virus, and this has been increasing with the variants, but the dangers are far less to those who are immunized as opposed to those who are not. And current vaccines continue to offer some protection, even in cases of variants like Omicron, albeit at a lower efficacy at times depending on the strain. However, what is coming out very clearly in the documentation that's coming from the United States and in other countries is that individuals who have been boosted, who may yet get sick or get recurrent COVID, are not landing in the ICU and not dying. The number of deaths the majority of deaths from COVID-19 right now are in those who have not been exposed to vaccination. Do we mention that there are adverse effects of the vaccines? Yes, of course we do. There are going to be side effects, mostly of a minor degree. And there's been a very small number of deaths directly linked with the vaccine, and we need to be honest about that. And that's part of the decision-making in making the choice to be vaccinated or not. But the benefits of being vaccinated far outweigh the risks. 5.5 million have already perished in the pandemic. And people say, well, you know, the risk of dying is less than 1%. It's not really. If you look at the worldwide mortality rate of COVID-19, it's over 1.6, 1.7%, depending on where it is, in which country you're looking at. Already 5.5 million have already perished in the pandemic. When you look at a 1.6, 1.7, almost 2% mortality, it means 2 out of every 100 people. Dr. Cassiano will mention to you the safety of the vaccine in relation to that. More than 9.6 billion doses of vaccine have been administered. It can hardly be said that this remains an experimental vaccine situation. And deaths and severe cases numbers are dropping dramatically in countries where vaccine rollout has already widely occurred. And we see this in many countries where the documentation is becoming more and more available. We're still seeing, with variants, ongoing infections, but we are seeing a mitigation of severe outcomes because of vaccination. So in conclusion, what is it that draws us to the understanding of the role of immunization in health situations today? Well, along with immunization and sanitation and clean water, vaccines and the use thereof have been foundational to the improved longevity seen around the world where these interventions have been applied. So looking at what has changed longevity over the years, it's not heart transplantation, it's not chemotherapy, it's not being able to do renal transplants or even dialysis. It is sanitation, clean water, and careful immunization. Now, vaccines have long been used by the Adventist Church throughout the world. Along with good health practices, they've provided protection against many infections and prevented illness and death, and have been used by missionaries very faithfully over the years. And as we witness the global magnitude of the pandemic, the deaths, the disability, and the long-term COVID-19 effects that are emerging in all age groups, we are encouraging our members to consider responsible immunization and the promotion and facilitation of the development of what is commonly termed herd immunity. Notice, we're encouraging, we're not mandating it as a church. And this has been mentioned a number of times in the presentations so far. The decision to be immunized or not is the choice of each individual and should be taken in consultation with one's healthcare provider. These are very important issues. Personal research, prayer, careful study, discerning God's leading, and these will give us peace and assurance in our decision-making. I believe that by God's grace, He is leading His church. Will we all agree on the way forward? Most certainly not. Sadly not. There are real fears. There are real questions. We need to listen to each other. We need to hear each other. We need to be respectful to one another and of one another and of one another's feelings and opinions. And those beautiful texts that were quoted in the last presentation of how we as brothers and sisters work with each other, speak to each other, hear each other, respect one another. It's going to determine. And I would tell you that when I read some of the letters that come across my desk, I I sometimes feel crushed by the attitudes they reveal, the vitriol, the accusatory spirit, the defamatory language. May the Lord help us, each one of us, not to vilify each other, not to stigmatize each other, not to categorize each other, not to demonize one another. So we're to live wisely beyond and through this pandemic. Community immunity is vital. And could it be? The question comes to my own heart that responsible immunization may include our responsibility to protect one another and not only ourselves. My prayer is that the Lord will bless each one as we make these crucial choices to his honor and to his glory. There are some additional resources which are available, and there are many of them if you go to the Health Ministry's website. And I'd like to conclude with the prayer of John for his friend Gaius. I pray that you may prosper in all things, be in health, just as your soul prospers. May the Lord bless each one of us. May we keep our eyes focused upon Jesus. May we know that he who has promised is faithful and will never leave us nor forsake us. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Landless. You have underlined very clearly that we definitely live by our health principles that we've always had, and how this can be combined with, of course, medical knowledge today. So thank you very much for underlining that for us.